Welcome back, Focus Learners. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us for another explainer today, because we're gearing up to chart one of the most astonishing journeys in modern business history. We are diving deep into the life, the empire, and the immensely complex legacy of Phil Knight. Now, you might think you know the story just because you've got a pair of his shoes in your closet, but trust me, you are in for an incredible ride. We're going to look at exactly how a scrappy middle-distance runner from Oregon built a literal global juggernaut, and then how he used that unfathomable wealth to completely reshape the world around him.
Okay, let's dive right into this. $35. Just think about that for a second. In 1971, $35 was the shockingly small amount paid to a graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson to commission a brand new logo. And that logo, of course, became the famous Nike swoosh. We're talking about something that is now universally recognized as one of the most valuable logos on the entire planet.
Now, I want you to immediately contrast that incredibly humble $35 investment with this. As of October 2025, Phil Knight's estimated net worth set at a staggering $35.4 billion. That right there really sets the immense stakes of his story. We're talking about a journey from essentially zero to tens of billions. So how exactly does that happen? Section 1, the blue ribbon beginnings. To understand this empire, we really have to look at the origins of a Portland kid who spent his mornings tabulating sports scores and literally running 7 miles back home.
That foundational, deeply personal connection to running sparked a really crucial sequence of events. So he graduates from the University of Oregon in 1959 with a business degree, but the real light bulb moment, that happens at Stanford. He's taking a small business class and writes a paper asking a pretty brilliant question for the time. Can Japanese sports shoes do to German sports shoes what Japanese cameras did to German cameras? He realizes there's this huge untapped market for high-quality, low-cost running shoes imported from Japan. So in 1962, he actually travels to Kobe, Japan, discovers the Tiger brand of shoes, and secures the distribution rights. By 1964, he partners with his former Oregon track coach, Bill Bowerman, on nothing more than a simple handshake deal. They start a company called Blue Ribbon Sports, which, as we know, was eventually renamed in 1971.
Which brings us right back to 1971 and that $35 logo. You know, when Carolyn Davidson first handed him the swoosh, Knight's famously underwhelming reaction was, "I don't love it, but it will grow on me." I mean, I think it's safe to say it definitely grew on him, right? And it grew on the rest of the world too. Oh, and don't worry, the story does note that in 1983, Davidson was given a gold swoosh ring and an undisclosed amount of Nike stock as a thank you for her massive contribution to the brand.
All right, moving on to Section 2, building the Nike empire. Because before the massive global endorsements and the flashy ads, Knight was basically just an accountant moonlighting as a shoe salesman, literally slinging sneakers out of the trunk of his green Plymouth Valiant at local track meets.
So as Blue Ribbon Sports started to take off, they needed a new identity. And it was actually Nike's very first full-time employee, a guy named Jeff Johnson, who suggested the name Nike. Named after the Greek winged goddess of victory, it was a perfectly fitting name for a company that was about to completely dominate the athletic world. From there, Knight proved to be a master at developing personal relationships with generational, transformational athletes, think Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, which totally cemented the brand globally.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Knight's empire building extended way, way beyond just sports apparel. Back in 1998, he took a 15% stake in an animation company called Will Vinton Studios. Eventually, citing mismanagement, Knight actually assumed control of the board, completely rebranded the whole operation to Leica, and pumped a massive $180 million into the stop-motion studio. The result? The 2009 smash financial success Coraline. And his son, Travis Knight, who had actually started out there as an animator, was subsequently promoted to CEO and president of the studio.
Section 3, family, tragedy, and transitions. Here, the narrative shifts, respectfully, to the deeply personal events that profoundly reshaped his later life and his entire trajectory.
In May of 2004, an absolutely unimaginable tragedy struck the Knight family. Phil's son, Matthew Knight, was just 34 years old, and he was traveling in El Salvador to film a fundraising video for a Christian nonprofit. Tragically, while scuba diving 150 feet underwater in Lake Ilopango, Matthew suffered a fatal heart attack, which was later found to be caused by an undetected congenital heart defect. Phil and his other son, Travis, traveled to El Salvador together to bring Matthew home.
You can clearly see the profound impact of this devastating loss in Knight's professional life. There's a very clear cause and effect progression of him stepping back from the helm at Nike. In November 2004, which was just several months after his son's funeral, Knight resigned as Nike's CEO, though he did keep his position as chairman of the board. Over a decade later, in June 2015, he announced he would be stepping down as chairman, and then by June 2016, he officially retired from the Nike board altogether.
Section 4, the billion-dollar philanthropist. This transition away from the daily corporate grind opened the door to massive charitable giving. In fact, by 2023, Knight was officially named America's second-largest donor.
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how these staggering sums have completely transformed major institutions. I mean, to put it in perspective, he's given over $400 million to Stanford for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program and brain resilience research. He has donated over $1 billion to his alma mater, the University of Oregon, and that's funding both academics and massive athletic facilities, including an arena lovingly named in honor of his late son, Matthew. But perhaps most notably, he and his wife Penny have pledged an incredible $2.7 billion total to the Oregon Health and Science University, and that is largely driving these massive matching challenges specifically to fund cancer research.
However, when you wield this level of financial influence, it doesn't always come without friction. Back in the year 2000, a major controversy unfolded at the University of Oregon surrounding student anti-sweatshop protests. The students actually held a sit-in demanding the university align with the Workers' Rights Consortium, or WRC. Knight, on the other hand, supported a different group, the Fair Labor Association, or FLA, which the protesting students heavily criticized as being essentially a corporate public relations exercise backed by Nike. So, the resulting fallout from this was intense. Initially, the university president sided with the students and signed a one-year contract with the WRC. Well, in response, Knight publicly criticized the WRC as misguided and immediately withdrew a $30 million commitment he had made for the university's stadium expansion. This huge financial standoff was only resolved in February 2001 when the Oregon University system stepped in and mandated that all institutions had to choose business partners from a politically neutral standpoint. That mandate effectively barred the university from joining either the WRC or the FLA. Once the university's relationship with the WRC dissolved, Knight reinstated his donation, and actually he increased it to over $50 million. Which leads us directly into our final thematic pillar, Section 5, Shaping Oregon's Politics.
It's really fascinating because his political donations have historically crossed party lines, even though he is a registered Republican. For example, he financed Democratic candidates like Neil Goldschmidt in the 80s and gave $250,000 to Democrat John Kitzhaber in 2014. However, citing deep concerns over the state's fiscal health, he has heavily backed Republicans and independents in more recent years. That includes $1 million to Chris Dudley, $3.5 million for Republican Newt Buehler in 2018, and over $4.75 million split between independent Betsy Johnson and Republican Christine Drazen in 2022. He's even described himself as being more conservative than Nike.
And this massive political funding culminated recently with his contributions to a conservative political action committee called Bring Balance to Salem. He donated $2 million in April 2023 and then followed that up with an absolutely record-breaking $3 million personal donation in October 2025.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought to reflect on. We have traced this incredible path from a young man selling Japanese running shoes out of the trunk of a green Plymouth Valiant all the way to a billionaire who has fundamentally and irrevocably reshaped the academic, athletic, philanthropic, and political landscape of an entire state, not to mention completely influencing global sports culture. So what is the true scale of Phil Knight's legacy? It's a remarkably complex, multi-billion-dollar reality that literally touches everything from the shoes on your feet today to the cancer research of tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me, Focus Learners. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.